Welcome, Elizabeth Huebner. Allow me to introduce you. This wonderful being, one of my favorite beings on the planet, is Elizabeth Huebner. She is an enchanting being of deep resonance, an ordained priestess of the Divine Mother Church and the Temple of Isis, a hypnotherapist, a vibrational healer, and a ritual performer. Elizabeth stands and flies what is that? Oh, Elizabeth stands.
Emphasis on that.
Elizabeth, yeah, exactly. Elizabeth stands in service and flies in service to the embodied remembrance that we are all that is. We are whole and all is sacred. Today she's going to be sharing with us about sacred play and accessing our full, authentic self-expression through imagination, inquiry, and the performing arts. She wants to bring our attention to initiation, to surrender, authenticity, ecstatic expression, purpose, truth, and Kalima. Welcome, my dear, dear friend Elizabeth. Hello.
Hello. I actually dreamed about you and Z last night.
We'll take it.
Yes. We're already stepping into a circle together. Yes, so beautiful to be with you again and get to drip and drop into this space of collaboration and exploration of the truth. Thank you so much for opening that space. It's so important right now. And yes, just as True is saying, like what a time to weave webs of connection so that we can claim this experience from a place of power. Let it be empowering rather than being the victim of it. And let us come out connected rather than separated and stronger because of it.
Right. And something I saw you wrote in the Facebook in response to what True was saying at the end was optimizing the opposition.
Yes.
What do you mean?
Yes. Yeah, and that actually, as True is talking, I was considering how to begin because I got so excited about coming on the call with you. And so even in my email letting you know what I'd like to talk about, there's like so many little pieces that I feel linking together.
Yeah.
And so in a minute, I'd actually like to tell you a story as a way to sort of bridge those pieces and kind of launch into a deeper discussion. But with the optimization of opposition, as you so well put it, it's for me, one of the things that I've noticed is that suffering is for us, that it's actually for our awakening. It's like when we resist life force, when we resist the truth of who we are, which is God presence, source presence, the great one, we pinch off life force and there comes this bottleneck, this tension as we are resisting the truth. And the tension is actually calling more presence. It's inviting more aliveness. I mean, if you've ever been in pain, like you are so present. You have to be so present to that physical pain when it presents. Because it's drawing in aliveness. And the more aliveness there is, eventually it'll just break through. So I've been playing with the idea of the goddess of suffering and what are the blessings that she has to offer us, especially in this time where there is so much suffering.
Yeah. Lovely. Now, just talking about that suffering, a question came up for me, because like suffering is basically healing for us, right? Or what did you say? Suffering?
It can be when we... Suffering is life wanting to break through. Suffering is actually the resistance of truth. It's the resistance of aliveness, because suffering has a story to it. Pain in itself is sensation, and so we can make a story about what that sensation that we call pain is. But suffering is story.
Right.
But what happens when we clamp around it, it's funny because what we're doing is we're resisting life, we're resisting God or goddess or our source. In that moment. We're resisting our own divinity. But the more we clamp down, the more comes to flood through. And if we can step into a place of being conscious of that, then we can begin to open the aperture and allow that force of truth, of God presence, of aliveness to blast through and blast us through into union with God. I have a dear friend who has incredibly done amazing healing work with her physical body. She cured herself of MS. She had 3 near-death experiences that she healed her body from. And she said, when the student is ready, the disease will appear. Which, I mean, I just got tingles even saying that. Like, talk about an idea that feels immediately controversial, first and foremost. But there is something deeply resonant about that. And so what is it for humanity? That when the student is ready, the disease will appear. And what does that mean? What is the opportunity for the opposition of disease? And my sense is that the invitation is to call you into this greater alignment with creation. And that doesn't necessarily mean miraculously curing yourself of disease. It could be the way that we face the truth of death, because that's also a truth of what it is to be alive, is that we do die. There is pain that we experience. But how do we meet that with this alignment of life force flowing through us, of God presence flowing through us? And there's a real opportunity in the face of illness, injury, emotional pain, the invitation to dive really, really deep. It's often suffering that turns people to God, that turns us to that inner journey. It's the dark night of the soul, calling us into deeper work.
Now, you know, we're talking about the suffering a lot. And what came to my mind immediately, I don't know why, probably movies and stuff, but it's in the olden days, and even still today, some Christians and different religions, they like inflict pain upon themselves, whip themselves.
Totally,
What the hell is going on there? I mean, surely that is a different, because, I mean, they're trying to punish themselves. Is the love there? What's happening? We're obviously not talking about that, are we?
No, and I think that's such an important distinction, because if we're falling into shame, we're actually becoming more separate. Shame is the belief that I am bad, that there is something intrinsically bad with me. The truth of who I am is intrinsically good. In fact, just the other day I was doing Byron Katie's work of inquiry on the thought, what was it? Something like I am bad. It was some sort of thought like that there's something, that my authentic self was bad. I was doing the work on that idea. And what came out is like, that's actually a contradiction, because your authentic self is by definition true. And so who we are authentically can never be wrong. It is by nature true. And yet the deep pain of the world is shame. The deep pain of the world is there is something intrinsically wrong with me. And so yes, when we go into that self-inflicted suffering of I am bad, let me punish myself, we're actually moving ourselves further away from truth, further away from God. However, I did have an insight about, because there's a few pieces in different traditions of using pain in worship. And I found this in just my own relationship to when something presents in the body, that one of the offerings of heightened sensation, heightened physical sensation, is that it can call the mind into stillness, like laser focus. And I don't remember what this prayer is called, but there's a practice in Judaism where you wrap a leather strap around your arm.
I should know what it is. I've done it 100 times.
Yes.
It's not the tefillin. Is it the tefillin? Yeah, no, you know, you do it every Shabbos. You do this, but it's not. It's not that painful. I suppose it is a little bit. You get the marks on your arm.
Well, it's calling you into sensation,
Right.
Really. It's not meant to harm you. It's calling you into a focus.
Yeah, you put the tefillin on. That's what it's called, the tefillin. You're putting on the tefillin.
Right.
And it's like little black cubes. You put one on your head and one on your arm here.
Yes.
Yeah. And then there's the Native American one.
The use of that.
Yes. And then the Native American one where you put hooks in your chest and you sundance for.
Right. And because there's such a paradox when it's like when your body is in pain, you can't dissociate from people do dissociate from the body as a response to physical pain.
Right.
But body pain is calling you into full presence. Body pain is like, pay the fuck attention. There is something going on here. Right. And what we are is pure being, is pure presence. So again, it's that calling in of the truth of who we are. That's the invitation with pain, is like, pay attention, bring your whole self here. And there's something incredibly powerful when we have the experience of our full self, not distracted, not separated, not like part of me is thinking about lunch already, but like, what is it for me to be totally here? That's drawing in the truth of who I am. So that can be an invitation for any experience that is painful, is to actually like get yourself in the stillness, surrender to the full experience of that, and let it teach you, let it lead you to the truth of who you are. It also leads you to surrender, because when you are in pain, don't escape that. We want to dissociate. We have a habit of dissociation, but what is it to be fully present to that? We have to let go. We have to let go that we are not in control. And again, talk about a huge cultural wake up. Like, what I keep saying over and over is like, I don't know anything. I don't know anything about what's going on. There's so much conflicting information out there. All I can do is be in a state of surrender. All I can do is be in a state of surrender and do the work of finding the truth of myself.
And in fact, that's the greatest option here. Like, I mean, it's not all you could do. You could go out and get involved with the pandemic stuff or 5G. You could really get activated. But really, it seems like the greatest benefit to each individual and thus the whole is to return. To turn back and look at the self. Yes.
And from that place of deeply the felt knowledge of who you are, action will come. So it's not, I am not for being the one who removes themselves from society. Right. And that's not my role, that's not my calling. And I've had to grieve the tragedy that I'm committed to being in the world, because it can be a very difficult place to be here.
Right.
Rather than be the priestess on the mountaintop who never has to interact with anything.
Yeah. But you do living so well.
Yes.
I mean, what was your cookie dance? I thought was brilliant.
Yes.
Yeah. Honestly, there's this ongoing quest against the cookie.
Yeah. Well, that's been my greatest battle here in quarantine, has been to cookie or not to cookie. And I guess that would, kind of launch me into what is really my life philosophy. And I want to tell it in a story, because I feel like that links the whole, the journey of it together. So if we can just take a few deep breaths to settle, because this is a story that came from a transmission. And in this moment of relaying the story as told to me by the Divine Mother of all creation, I surrender to her heart. I surrender and ask humbly that she be one with my heart, be one with my breath, be one with my voice and my words. There was a time beyond time, where the great beings of the universe collected, an incredible convergence of pure being. Together they came for a great purpose, and the purpose was play. For as they arrived, below them they noticed a gorgeous world, a gorgeous game. And they recognized that the rules of this game made it particularly challenging and therefore particularly enticing to dive into. Many of them had already been lost in the game. And so they came with great purpose to awaken their friends and their companions, that they may all delight in the wonder of life. And so they dove and dove and dove and dove into life. And into life they found themselves within the great womb, a place of remembrance, a place of the interconnectedness of all, forming themselves from the formless with the mother's blood and breath. And she breathed them into life. And as they were born, the great game began because they felt themselves for the first time separate. And what is this strange, unique experience of separateness? And so as they grew, this feeling deepened, and with it came fear. The next injection of the game, and so from their fear they began to respond. They began to respond in fear. They began to possess that which they feared. They began to take control of the women, of the land, of the animals, of all of which they perceived out of control. They began to cultivate. And as they moved into deeper and deeper this separation and this role of fearful possession, pain arrived on the planet. Suffering beyond which many of us can imagine. For the truth of this game is that life cannot be denied. And the more that we seek to possess and control her, the more she will scream to break free. And it is in this suffering that something magical began to happen, for in this pain, many began to seek a greater power. They began to seek meaning making. And this was the gift of the mind, the gift of rational thought. And so through the injection of rationality, we began to self-examine. We began to collect sciences in the study of nature, the study of the human mind, the study of human emotion, and through rational thought, we began to take back morality. We began to form agreements of what it is to live harmoniously together, and the game became more complex. And there were mistakes, just as there were truths that continued to unfold. And as we continued along this journey, we at last reached a step where people began to awaken to their oneness, awaken to their interconnectedness, and seek what is authentically true. They began to claim the freedom to be true. And this is that time of claiming the authentic self, of seeking what is true. Beyond simply the rational mind, we seek what is true in the heart. We seek the felt remembrance of our oneness. And so it is now that we return. We return to that knowledge once held in the womb, that we may awaken to the truth, the true being which we are. And then begin to truly play. The first level of the game is awakening. We are yet to see what comes next. In exploring authenticity, I was looking up the definition, and it is defined as true to origin. And I love that. True to origin. And as human beings, we have two origins that I think are really important. Our essential origin is source. Our essential origin is the great one, the universe, God presence, pure being, pure consciousness. But we also have a material origin. My body has an origin. I have a material lineage. And it's actually that brings the incredible blessing of uniqueness. Because we're each like stained glass, and we all have our own pattern and collection of color. And the light that shines through is the same light. But it's this pattern that makes it unique and so special, because it won't last. It's ephemeral. We're here for an instant and it goes. And the more light that we can allow to shine through, the more we get to sparkle, the more of us, the more of our gift, the more of our authentic offering to this life gets to be expressed. And that is the game. So I that story to me came to me as like a lightning rod inspiration. And to me it speaks to, people often say the question of purpose, of why are we here. The knowledge that I've received is that we all have the same purpose, and the purpose is to play. It is to delight in the experience of existence. It is to be awake in form as God beings. And then we get to create, because that is a piece of our essential nature. We are infinite love, and we are infinite creativity. That's the properties of God: infinite love, infinite creativity. And so what we can create when we have God presence flowing through us is limitless. And that's really the game that we want to play. The waking up piece, that's just level 1. But we have to wake up so that we can really fully engage in life, fully engage my system of humanness, and fully engage with you. And what is it for us to play on that field together as a global community?
What about people who like, you know, answer back with the notion of that playing is for children, and that you've got to get serious, life is serious, and you know, like you've got to take care of business, you know? Where's play fit into that notion, or those people's?
Well, the best games are played very seriously. We have to commit.
Right.
And so that doesn't mean that life is always frivolous. You know, even for somebody with a spiritual path, even for somebody who's like quote unquote awakened, life may not be an endless stream of joy, because there is part of the game is acknowledging the tragedy. Part of the game is, I am so invested in the love of my family that for me to lose my parents will be heart-rendering. And beautiful that it is. And also allow me to keep the perspective that I'm choosing into this commitment, that this is a part of the rules of the material world that I've chosen to participate in. And so the thing is that with or without our knowledge, what Jung says, if you do not make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. And so we are all ruled by our programming. We are all ruled by our story. And so you can either be immersed in the story, you can either be like, you know, micro lens and unaware that you are even in a story, or you can be the storyteller. You can claim yourself as the storyteller. And that's the connection between authenticity and being self-authoring. That is the goal, is to be true to origin, to awaken to what is authentically true in me, which exists on a spectrum. Like, I am definitely in a constant journey of unearthing what is authentic to me. But to get to a place in my authenticity where I get to be self-authoring, so I can see the code of culture on me. I can see my biological coding. I can see these stories that sort of on autopilot will run through me. And as I begin to notice them, I can choose how I want to opt in and play them, how I want to play them, and possibly even choose a different story.
How do you begin then to notice the difference between the subconscious or the unconscious and the conscious? Like, if it's unconscious and subconscious, how do we access it?
That is such a good question. I feel like there are so many ways to begin to unravel it, and I am definitely in a constant journey of discovering the how. Self-inquiry is the first one. You have to ask why. Why do I do the things that I do? Just begin to question. Another piece of that can be perspective taking. I mean, that's the beauty of living with others, is that my perspective is not the same as your perspective. And so what happens in relationship is that there is often conflict where I am perceiving something one way and you are perceiving it the other way. And if I can notice that we both seem pretty adamant in what we feel is true, and I can just decide to step out of mine for a moment, I can always pick it back up.
Right.
And step into your perspective, then I can begin to see how mine is a choice.
Right.
And on the creative spectrum, I'm like, this is why I love fiction. This is why I love storytelling. This is why I love performance, is because it allows you to see into these different ways of being and existing in the world. And as you start exploring the why, as you start exploring why do we do the things that we do, you begin to see those pieces of impulse. Like, oh, I did this because, my father, when I was a 5-year-old, really shamed me for that one thing. And that created a belief that I have around who I am as a person. And now I can see how at 8 years old and 12 years old and 16, those choices that I made were actually running that program.
Right. And this got revealed by, and something I want to talk about is archetype and playing characters and archetypes, because I know, my experience with you is that this is one of your wonderful gifts, and I love to do it as well. Embody the archetypes, and tell us about like that. What the playing with other characters that isn't necessarily Elizabeth as she's identified.
Yes. Yeah, I get so excited about the performing arts, and I studied acting since I was 7 years old. I went to a performing arts conservatory, and I studied a lot of Sanford Meisner, who really emphasizes the use of imagination. So acting is behaving truthfully under imaginary circumstances. And the training that you receive in that is how to use your imagination to create a real emotional response in whether it's the exercise or the play. So the best actors aren't pretending. It's not caricature, it's real.
Right.
And in fact, if it isn't real, we don't connect with it. And this is, again, really interesting when we think about authenticity, because it also suggests that if we fully commit to something, if we fully believe in it, that it can be authentic, even if it wasn't necessarily, the way I was born, even if it's not necessarily like my program.
So reality is dependent on how much we give ourselves to it.
Yes. And so we can begin to do that consciously. And so the performance of archetype, now shadow work has like such a huge, broad umbrella, and there's so many ways of working with it. One of the ways that I've been really enjoying is internal family systems therapy, which I highly, highly recommend. It's very shamanic in its feel. but you're going deep into the internal world, and you are meeting aspects of the self. You're meeting parts. And they have names, they kind of have archetypal roles, but that's ultimately not necessary, because what matters is more like the authentic way that they present in you.
Yeah.
And essentially, we have a lot of protector parts, and then we have exiled parts. And they create this family system dynamic within us. And this is a great exercise to actually start claiming your part. It frees you to also be able to speak, to allow the part to speak. So if I'm being triggered by something with my partner, for me to be able to not, often what can happen is like, ooh, like I'm being triggered, but that's bad. That's the ego. Better set that one aside. Don't say that. Don't express that. That's not true. But if I can recognize like, ooh, I am being triggered really a lot right now.
Right.
And also I recognize that isn't the whole truth. Like I do have a bigger self over here.
Yes.
But let me just make space for that fear, that need that part is standing for.
Right.
And to allow it to express.
And
we were talking about the other day how it is better to express in a way that is messy than to not express.
Right.
We are so underexpressed, and we're in desperate need of that authentic self-expression. It's not just internal authenticity. It's not just like, ooh, I'll be authentic. It's like, no, authenticity means being lit up by life. It's being self-expressed. And so that's another way that acting and performance can link you in, because it's inviting you to embody an aspect of self. And here's the thing, is that we are one and whole with all that is. We entail all aspects within us. I have the dictator within me just as much as I have the rebel. And I have the king just as much as I have the priestess. And I have the pauper, just as much as I have the businessman or woman. So to be able to consciously choose that part and give it life, give it its full voice, its full expression. And that's another aspect of some of these acting exercises that I've used, is if you're feeling badly after an exercise, one of the repetition exercise is this awesome exercise, incredible for self-development. I'm incorporating it into my courses because it's amazing for authenticity and full self-expression. And if you are not self-expressing in that, often after the exercise, you don't feel good. And it's because you have to let it out to let it go. And if you aren't feeling well, if you're feeling constrained, it's because there's something that needs to be expressed.
Right.
So you have to let it out to let it go. And so we can do that intentionally, and that's what ritual theater is to me. Right. That you can intentionally choose an archetype, or better yet, create one. Become the goddess of rage.
Right.
So that you can express your anger in container, with safety, with boundaries, and become an electric, like a huge expression of that. Right. Because often those parts are standing for something really important. Right. And if we ignore them, we're doing a disservice. Whereas if we invite their voice forward, they become integrated into our whole.
Now, something that's come up a lot in these conversations has been this notion of honoring the action, the doing of something. So the embodying of this archetype, and but honoring it by preceding it with a kind of a presencing in the divine feminine. Can you speak a little about that, and maybe how we've, as society and in religions and stuff, we've axed that notion of the divine feminine preceding the divine masculine actioning of something.
Yes. Yeah. Beautiful. And I'll speak from my own self-knowledge, and there's so many ways to receive wisdom and interpret it. The mother holds, so even masculine and feminine, that exists in polarity. It's better even to conceive of oneness and individuation. And that's the dance of creation, is melting into oneness and then drawing out focusing out into that point of individuation and then diving back into wholeness. And in that wholeness, there is neither masculine and feminine. However, the feminine principle does hold that knowledge of our oneness and our wholeness when we are in polarity. It's the feminine that is holding the knowledge of our interconnectedness. I mean, one of the beautiful things about women's bodies is we literally can grow life with it. For female-bodied women, we can grow life within us. And at that time, we are one, male or female within me, and even, non-gendered within me. It is one with me. So there's this sacred knowledge that is held within the female body of our oneness. And I'm losing your question.
Well, the notion was that in order to honor and accurately display the kind of presencing of the direction, the best technique seems to be to sit within an unconditional space first. So, like, for example, if I'm having a disagreement with Z and it's irritating me, then to sit in an unconditional space of loving presence first, and then embrace the archetype of Kali Ma and kind of go no, and kind of play with the extremeness of the archetype. Yes. But importantly, to precede it with this accepting stillness. Yes. And I just wanted to know how that translates in you with the spaces I've seen you hold in group and in session are so divinely accepting at the same time as having an archetypal direction. Like they've got an arrow, but there's a womb there as well.
Yes. So the key is that we have to be connected to our oneness with Source to play in that way. Otherwise, we actually are identifying with the part. Rather than coming from a place of being of Source and then choosing into that part. And this can be messy. It's definitely been messy for me in the ways that I've, in playing under pressure. It can be messy. It's not always as graceful as like, wait, let me connect with the divine. And then, it doesn't always work out that way if I'm really charged. But it is best played. It is most effective if we return into self and dip deep into what is true, the unchangeable, the infinite source within. Right. And for me, Divine Mother holds that presence. And like you said, it's womb presence. It's being deeply, deeply held in compassionate love. And from that, we get to pull out of the womb and step into our outfit, our costume of performing a part. Right. Which we all are all the time, right? Persona is like who I've chosen to express and be. And I can change that too. My accent has changed if I'm like living really in Iowa and I get that like Midwestern kind of flattening of vowels. Whereas if I'm living on the West or the East Coast, like all of a sudden, like I start to open the back of my mouth more and sound a little bit different. When I'm performing, I sound different.
So what's the advantage to embodying these archetypes as opposed to just be yourself? Like what's the advantage of like the characters you play? Like I love the talking in tongues that you do in that space. That really channeled me in that last time at Odyssey. And then I started doing it and it was like there was this. So the point is, what is the advantage of the archetypes of those characters as opposed to just be yourself?
Well, part of it is that by exaggeration, we step further into self-authoring. So again, it's that and being yourself is like a stage of development, we could say. Right. Like the authenticity of like, I just, I shoot from the hip and I just am who I am. And like, and that, there is element of truthiness, of authenticity to that type of expression.
Right.
But what we're after is like the big, deep, authentic. Like, what is the deep, deep truth of origin? And that entails being self-authoring. And I cannot be self-authoring if I'm identified with a part.
Okay.
And so that part of the value of playing with archetypes is that it allows you to see how those parts play within us. It allows us to claim them through giving them full life, recognizing that that is part of me. And in so doing, it begins to weave them back into wholeness, into like an interconnected web. And ideally, like, we want to be able to move in all ways. Like, I want to be able to pull out that, laser focused protector when I need to. And I want to be able to fall into that, gorgeously receptive, soft feminine. And so by exercising these archetypes,
yes,
I am exorcising them from myself,
yes,
as them being self-identified, and finding myself in sourced self, the mistress able to choose what part she wants to play.
Wow. So what I'm hearing, just to sum that up, what I heard there was wonderful. So that by embodying and animating these archetypes, we start to realize that any identity we have is just an archetype, even if it's our Markabadi, even if it's our home, the home location on Google Maps, even if it's that our home location, it's still an archetype. And the self-authoring happens when you realize that you are not any of those. And so by playing and being all of these other options helps you to realize that you're none of them and all of them.
And all of them.
And at the same time helps you to tread the neural pathways to those characters so that they can be accessed more readily in response to the Maya and the universe and whatever's going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it widens our scope of self-expression, and self with a capital S is source. So it widens the scope of source's expression through that gorgeous stained glass creation that is my human incarnation in this moment, Elizabeth.
Wow. Just making notes. So how have you found this like plays out in your everyday? Because of course, Elizabeth is still going to get upset and chopping wood before, chopping wood after. I remember my first teacher, I love to talk about him. He was upset at me because he thought I was an hour late to a meeting, and I wasn't, but he thought I was. He was sure I was. Anyway, so I was there and I was talking and I was arguing my point. I'm not an hour late, we said it. And then he just destroyed a filing cabinet. He just attacked it and destroyed it. And I was shocked. And I was like, what the hell? Why did you do that? And he goes, it took less energy to release it than it did to hold it in. And now I feel great and better. And we can get on with the day. It's like, I did it so that I can move on. So it was done from a desire to surrender it rather than an attachment to the identity of it.
Right, let it out to let it go.
But I want to talk about that, how, because there are some people who think that they're letting out their anger by going around and being angry at people. So where's the difference there? Who
is steering the ship? So again, it's that return, especially with volatile emotions, because we do have a responsibility for the way that we are showing up in the world. And again, the truth of source is infinite love as well, right? That is the deepest truth of God presence is infinite love. And so if we're actually tapping into that truth, how does love infinitely want to move through me? How will love infinitely move through me when I experience anger. So part of it is creating that space where you're intentionally tapping into self. That is the ideal, is to like take a minute, tap into self, and then create a container where you can express, where it's safe for you and safe for anyone that you might, you have an agreement about it. So you're not just like unleashing, like, I have a part and it needs to express, like that's not coming from self. You're letting your inner child have a tantrum.
Right.
So we do have a responsibility to be the inner parent, and that's what self ought to be, is our inner parent. And there can be some inner negotiating around like, all right, now actually isn't maybe the best time in the board reading to, just throw everything on the table and like light it on fire, you know? So I hear you, and thank you for presenting, and like, I'll do my best to speak for what the need is now. And then maybe I go home and I, have a little bonfire in my backyard. So, I really like to create specific ritual around the expression of a part, around an embodiment. Right. So literally creating sacred circle and intentionally embodying that and calling upon my guides, calling upon the presence of, all that is holy and great to stand as protectors and witness. And that's what I do in the creation of those temple environments. And what I believe people respond so strongly to is that we create a very strong container. We have a really powerful boundary of the space that we're creating so that we can hold whatever comes through. And then the other piece of the work that I do, it is to receive the part as God, to receive the part as divine. So it might not be just like, I'm angry and I need to express myself. It's like, okay, the goddess of anger is showing up right now. What is her lesson? What is she standing for? Yeah. What is her divine message? Not just the, she's polarized right now because I've been ignoring and neglecting her. And now all of a sudden it got triggered off and it comes out as, verbal or physical violence. Yeah. But what is the sacred role of the goddess of anger? And so that's why I like claiming it and using that language of like, I'm talking to a divine archetype. You can, I mean, it is fun to play in the realm of like, I'm just going to be, all the different parts, but container. Otherwise we can hurt ourselves and we can hurt others. If you're identifying with a part, you are not playing the part is playing you. So you need to take some time to step into space.
So you're saying play the part rather than it play you?
Yes.
And do we play the divine? Or does the divine play us?
The divine is source. The divine is the originator. So the divine is playing us. So
if we're playing the part and it's not divine, then we're playing it. Otherwise, it's the divine playing us.
This is the beauty about doing divine embodiment. Because if you pretend well enough, you will call it forward in you. Right. And this is like the beauty of actually how we can use our imagination to access truth. Imagination is this incredible gateway. It gives permission for the rational mind to let go so that we can actually explore these felt sense of truth. So similar to in acting class, I'm choosing imaginary circumstance and I'm going really deep into that imaginary circumstance so that I can have a real emotional response. I can do that with the divine. And if I'm thorough enough in that imagining, I bring it into being. I bring it into life. So the thorough enough is there's got to be a surrender process, right, involved, and a trust, and this is where maybe the why the container is so important, because you have to feel safe enough to surrender to that divine principle, because it could do anything if you give away your power to it. What's to stop it? So container, and also discernment, and the discernment of what you're calling on. because there's a lot of shit out there. And everyone wants to be heard.
Right.
And so, this is part of, I feel incredible gratitude for my mother's work, Divine Mother Healing and Guidance, which I grew up with her and started training with her at 16. And one of the key components in her work is discernment. You are dropping in, and the gateway is in the heart. It's always in the heart. The truth to the divine is in the heart. So dropping into the heart, asking for the divine to come forward, Divine Mother, come forth. And then noticing, so really gauging your subtle perceptions as you call that forth. Divine Mother, come forth, and then I let go, and I might call again. And then when I begin to notice, I ask, is this Divine Mother?
Right, inquire.
Is this Divine Mother? Do you come in the name of the truth of the universe? And so I use a few different phrases to check. Do you come in the name of God? Do you come in the name of divine truth, the truth of the universe? Divine love is tricky because actually a lot of beings can come in the name of love. So that's why truth of source, the truth of God, the wholeness of God, those are very powerful incantations.
Right.
And it will, whatever comes forth will answer yes or no. And yes is always clear. Yes is always like more light, more life, like expansion or deepening or deep stillness. No, the way that I receive no is often like nothing. Like if I don't get an answer, that's usually a no. Or any type of contraction or fogginess. And each of us develop our own signals of identifying what is a very clear divine truth vibration and what might be something else. And that subtle distinction, I think, is so important and necessary when we open to these fields. Because as you're right, you're really opening to in a big space. And here's the other thing is that if you're calling on divine energy, the divine energy protects you. It comes through you, and you are invincible in that. When you are in the truth, when you are standing in your divine truth, I am a divine being living in a physical form. I am claiming that. I'm claiming my spiritual authority. Like nothing can hit you.
Why do you think that this practice is being removed from most of the religious world? Like, you know, Christians removing the divine feminine, you know, temples of Isis being destroyed and built over. Why would anyone want to? Why have we done this, and what are the implications for society? This removal of this divine feminine.
It began with fear. It began with this dance of like, we leave the mother, physical and metaphorical. We leave the mother, we come out, and we begin to witness ourselves as separate. And the energy of the mother is the energy of all creation. It is the energy of life turned up to the max. It's an incredibly the power to create life and destroy life. That's the sacred power of the mother. We are the triad, you know, bringing you into being and taking you out of being, bringing you into being. That's a fearsome energy. I mean, the Kali energy, or even just the energy of nature. I mean, the energy of nature is not something we can control. And boy, is she coming back ferociously right now, due to our lack of respect for her. So in our fear, we began a process of trying to possess and control. And that begins to feed itself. So fear of death, fear of life, fear of that intimate union of life and death. We are born and we are going to die. And I think there are a complexity of reasons, the why of why things have progressed. The other piece is that the sacred feminine knowledge is the knowledge that we ourselves as physical beings, each of us is divine. Each of us has our own spiritual self-authority. We are one and whole with all that is. And you can't control that. There's no, that's a limitless power. So there has been an incredible movement to sever humanity from our spiritual self-authority.
Right.
By placing it somewhere outside of ourselves, and we all participate in this. We are often constantly in a place of wanting someone else to be the authority, and so we surrender that, and that, you know, creates all sorts of loops of shame. I mean, when we disconnect from the truth of who we are, this was a huge insight I had a couple of weeks ago doing my own self-work, is that when you do not allow an authentic aspect of self to express, you begin to suppress. And in the suppression, you start to feel shame.
Right.
So when we deny our authentic self-expression, which is God, which is divine, we begin to feel shame. And shame is not, I did something bad. Shame is, I am bad. Right. I am intrinsically bad. My God self is bad.
Right.
And like, talk about like the witch burnings, right, and, you know, all of the massive violence that has been exacted upon those who claimed their spiritual self-authority. That's the message, because what better way to sever people from themselves?
Exactly.
And then, of course, you know, it's easier to control. And the world was a pretty crazy place at some time. You know, like, I'm not even necessarily saying that the impulse towards control is necessarily a bad one. I can find good in wanting to, you know, stop warring, to stop tribalism to the extent where we're like battling and slaughtering and raping and pillaging.
That didn't really work though, did it? I mean, yeah, we're still warring and raping and pillaging, and
that's because it was exacted with imbalance. It was the masculine as severed from the feminine, this feminine shoved into a subservient role, undervalued for its role, rather than it being this incredible balancing, holding container of truth to go alongside with rationality, order, penetrating action, and all of that. When they're together, when they're unified, then again, it's like the world opens up in possibilities of what can be accomplished. Yeah. And what can be accomplished always from the truth of love. And that's what we got away from in denying the feminine, is that infinite power of love, that recognition that you and I are one. Right. And so how could I harm you? And actually, I mean, even as I'm saying that, I don't know if we have ever had a time on the planet where we were fully living in that truth. And that's important too, because I think there is a tendency to romanticize old worlds. And the truth is like, there is incredible beauty in these ancient cultures, like goddess cultures where the mother was revered, and indigenous cultures that are living close to the land, and also still patriarchy in many indigenous cultures where women aren't allowed to be in certain roles. And also in goddess cultures, there was, you know, can be shaming of men. There can be the imbalance of they couldn't protect themselves, you know, from violent marauders. So we are at this actually really beautiful time where the masculine energy, not just men, masculine and me as well, is returning to the feminine, returning as an adult. That's the invitation. We are going through the initiation of adolescence into adulthood. And in adulthood, we return to the feminine in union. And that's like Hieros Gamos. That is the sacred sexual act. Returning to her not as the mother, appreciation for the mother, but returning to her as beloved. And we unite in oneness with that return.
Beautiful. Beautifully said. Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you. Tell us, like, how do people get in touch with you, what are you doing? Are you offering coaching, one-to-ones? What's going on? What's going on for you?
Yes. So I do one-to-one spiritual coaching, and my preference is to work with people over a period of time, because I work as directed to Divine Mother. So it could be that we do deep dive vibrational healing, and that moves us to practice embodiment work. I love drawing in elements of play, where you get your assignment of going off into adventure and creating initiations for your own rites of passage. And then I also have a workshop coming up just for women. And then I'll be doing a larger one that will include all of everyone who wants to take part. But it's Be Divine Goddess Embodiment, and it starts May 22nd. So we'll be over 3 weekends, the new moon to the full moon. We will be creating ourselves, choosing an internal archetype, claiming that as divine, and working with that archetype over a couple weeks, and then closing with the ritual theater, which you were able to experience, of really embodying that and honoring that through a ritual and ceremony.
Amazing. What's the best site people can get you on?
It's Be Divine Embodiment, and that's a bee like the honeybee. Be Divine Embodiment. And I'm on Facebook too. You can message me there.
And the links are in the video below. And wow, it really is it's such joy to have you in the world. And sharing these insights and this wisdom, and I like particularly your point about the romanticizing of the past, because there is this sort of re-emergence of the muse, as I call it, the return of the witch, this notion where we're honoring the sacred embodiment of that divine feminine principle inside that the feminine archetype. And then there's this romanticization of the sort of the Isis time. Oh, it was so great, and we were honored as these. And yes, but also there was missing something. And I love that return of the masculine. Return of the adult masculine. Now it's matured. It realizes that its greatest result will come when it honors truly and deeply that feminine space, to allow it to be itself, its full masculine potential inside the womb of the feminine.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, yes. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It is literally a divine pleasure. Again,
such a pleasure.
Welcome back to the show.
Space. What a ride that was.
Oh, so wonderful. And I'm really enjoying your improvisation play theater that you're doing on Facebook. So
if anybody listening wants a piece of homework, so our vehicle for expression is this system. So dance, sing, play, express. How can you use your physical body to play and engage? It brings so much more aliveness into your life. And be silly. Let's be silly. Absolutely.
And we can be seriously silly.
Yes, very seriously silly.
Yeah, I think it was Oscar Wilde who said life's too important to take it seriously.
Yes.
But play, on the other hand, we can be serious with play.
Very serious play. The game of life is a very serious play.
Oh, such a pleasure. Thank you, Elizabeth. Such an honor. And
so wonderful to connect with you again.
And please send my love to your mum. What a wonderful being she is. And thank her once again for having produced you.
Oh, it is my honor to have her as a mother, that's for sure. My divine mother in the flesh.
Thank you once again. Thank you,
Markabadi. So wonderful to connect in this space.
See you soon. Look forward to it. Oh, wow. What a wonderful show. Oh, my guests. Thank you to True Osborne. Thank you to Elizabeth Huebner. Two divine beings. Wonderful. Sacred. Now, sacredness is the godliness, the divine, the grace. Don't worry about what you call it. God, the divine spirit, the Holy Mother, the tree. None of these words are important. What is important is how we turn up, how much presence we bring to it, and how much presence we bring to our voice. And remember what True said. I'm going to remember what True said. True said that the purpose of our voice, to be heard. Carl Jung said, the greatest gift we can give anyone is the space to be heard. That includes ourselves. The greatest gift we can give ourselves is the space to be heard. Our voice is also our authenticity, our truth, our identity. And our voice is there for us to be remembered. And these are ourselves, for us to remember ourselves. It's within this container of self-acceptance. All of our parts, our anger, our glue, our stickiness, our joys, our lights, our things, they're all embraced by love. And it's in that love aspect where the truth, that's the truth. The love aspect is the truth, the self-acceptance of love. And yes, the truth shall set us free. In the beginning was the Word. Let's use our words to free ourselves, and use our words to embody those identities, those separate identities, those archetypes, those personality traits. Give them characters, give them names, give them beings. You know, here's one from the other Liz. You know, it's a little demon creature. Like, be the archetypal characters, and allow yourself to really animate them into being. And in doing so, we can relieve ourselves from the attachment of identity to any one, helping us realize we are all of them, divine. We are it. The completeness. The bit in the middle of the yin, yang, bit in the middle. The Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, whatever Trinity you're talking about, 3 is the smallest number. That's where all it happens. The DNA spiraling, the electrons, the protons, it's all about duality becoming singularity. So play at the duality and you can become singular. Such an honor, such a privilege. Wow, who's tomorrow? Priscilla is going to be talking about a sacred sexuality. Fantastic, from Puerto Rico, might be in Ecuadorian. And then Izzy, Sheranondo. I don't know, he's got a new last name. Izzy is a sacred being of musical play and presence, divine ritual presence, and that's another thing, the rituality of presence. So anyway, tune in tomorrow. Please like, share the video, have watch parties. I have a book, bookevolve.com. Check it out, and enjoy the world. It is such a joy, such a joy. Remember, pain is our reflection to presence. Enjoy.